In a major move, the Reserve Bank of India has issued a circular for international trade settlement in rupee.
The Indian rupee trade could be an alternative. India and Russia can trade without the US dollar.
This real?
Could help India promote its export and facilitate trade with countries under sanction.
So the RBI is deploying Economics 101, increasing the demand for rupees. Under this new system, foreign traders will require more rupees. And more demand equals more value.
Hi everybody, on 11th of July 2022, the Reserve Bank of India made a very bold announcement whereby domestic traders could settle their imports and exports with Indian rupees. And this move of taking the INR global is a very big deal because it is set to help India do trade directly with Russia without depending on the American banks. So on one side, while this could push us into new horizons of world trade with Russia, Iran and Venezuela, on the other, this move could actually destroy our relations both with the US and Europe. So this is not just a major move from the economic standpoint, but also from the geopolitical standpoint. So the question is, what is RBI's strategy behind bringing this system? How will this help us trade with Russia and Iran in spite of the Western opposition? How will this help the economy of India? And most importantly, what are the study materials to help you understand this system better? This video is brought to you by Multiple, but more on this at the end of the video. The first thing we need to understand is, why is RBI suddenly allowing international trades to be settled in INR? Well, this is because when Russia invaded Ukraine, the American sanctions removed Russia from something called the SWIFT network. And this has brought several trade challenges for India and many other countries. Now, to understand this RBI strategy, we first have to understand how does the existing SWIFT network work, and how have the US and Europe very cleverly bullied the world trade with sanctions in the name of world peace. So let's understand how does the SWIFT network work. You see guys, the SWIFT network usually involves 6 different entities. These are the Indian trader, Indian bank, American bank 1, American bank 2, foreign bank and foreign trader. Now the highlight over here is that the Indian bank will have an account in the American bank where it has its money in dollars. Similarly, the Sri Lankan bank will have a bank account in American bank too, where again they will store their money in US dollars. This is because only US banks can hold dollars. This is the reason why you will see that almost all the banks in the world have an account with a US bank, wherein they have their money stored in dollars. So let's say Reliance wants to import minerals worth 1 crore rupees from Sri Lanka. So what Reliance would do is, they would give the Indian bank 1 crore Indian rupees and ask them to pay the same amount in dollars to the Sri Lankan trader's account in the US. So now that Indian bank has 1 crore rupees in its Indian account, it would send a message to its dollar account in America to send 1 crore worth of dollars to Sri Lanka's bank's dollar account in the US. In this case, assuming 80 rupees to dollar to be the exchange rate, $125,000 would be transferred from the Indian account in the US to the Sri Lankan account in the US. And now that the Sri Lankan bank has $125,000 in the US account, it would pay the Sri Lankan trader the equivalent of $125,000 from its account in Sri Lanka. So assuming the exchange rate to be 350 between dollars and Sri Lankan rupee, the Sri Lankan bank would pay 4 crore 37 lakh 50,000 Sri Lankan rupees to the Sri Lankan trader. So here, as you can see, this system requires a lot of communication between different banks. It needs a lot of calculation to be done due to fluctuation in exchange rates, and more importantly, it requires a complex network of thousands of banks from all across the world. Therefore, it is managed by a highly sophisticated messaging network called the SWIFT network. And this network is very tightly controlled by both the US and Europe. And the catch over here is that more than 50% of the international trades are done through the SWIFT messaging system alone. So the question is, what is the problem with this system and why is the RBI trying to build an alternative? Well, there are 3 major problems with this system. Firstly, since this entire system is controlled by Europe and the US, if they do not like you, they will just impose sanctions and cut you off from the SWIFT network. So in short, they will not let you trade through the SWIFT system. And this is what the West did to Iran. Secondly, not letting you trade could still be acceptable, but since US has control over all the country's dollar accounts, they could even freeze your money that is kept in their US bank accounts. This is what happened to Russia wherein after the Ukraine invasion, $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves have been frozen. So in spite of having $300 billion, Russia cannot use its own money to trade.
It will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen.
The pressure on Russia and on Vladimir Putin is growing. New sanctions on its central bank just today.
The sanctions against the Central Bank of Russia, which were enacted on Monday morning, are probably the single largest sanctions action in modern history.
And lastly, this system is very, very costly. Since all four entities involved in the system take a commission, the cost of transferring money itself costs you anywhere between 1 to 5%. So on a transfer of say 120 crores, if the banks add a 3% exchange rate margin, that means they would charge you 3.6 crore rupees just of the exchange rate.
Gosh.
So all of this put together, even if India wants to trade with Russia, even though we do not have anything to do with the Russia-Ukraine invasion, just because the West does not like it, we are not able to trade with Russia with ease. And what's even worse is that it's not like the Europeans have stopped trading with Russia, because they realized that if they do not get Russian gas, their economy will fail. So you know what?
Yes.
They have made exceptions such that some Russian accounts will be allowed to operate so that Europe can still use Russian gas and at the same time be the moral police of the world.
You know, somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. Tell me if buying Russian gas is not funding the war? I mean, why is it's only Indian money and oil coming to India which funds, but it's not gas coming to Europe which funds? If countries in Europe and the West and the United States are so concerned, why don't they allow Iranian oil to come into the market? Why don't they allow Venezuelan oil to come into the market?
This is how the West is using its so-called supremacy to hinder other countries' trade in the name of moral policing and world peace. And this is where, ladies and gentlemen, RBI's move comes in. Here's where India has come up with an alternative system to bypass the system and still do business with foreign countries. And they did that by allowing international trade to be done in Indian currency. Now, if you look at the RBI notification, they say that this can be done through something called Vostro account. So the question over here is, what is Vostro account? How will this transaction actually happen? And if executed, how will this benefit India? Well, to understand the system, let's say a Russian company wants to trade with an Indian named Akshay Kumar, and he wants to do that without going to SWIFT. So now the Russian company will have a Russian bank account which has money stored in rubles, and this Russian bank will also have an account in India where they would store the money in Indian rupees in Indian bank. And this account is what is called as Vostro account. So basically, it's a bank's bank account held by a foreign bank. In this case, it's a Russian bank's bank account held in the Indian bank. So now, if Akshay Kumar wants to import sunflower oil from a Russian company, here's how it will work out. Firstly, Akshay Kumar pays 5 crore Indian rupees to the Russian bank account in the Indian bank, which means the Vostro account will get 5 crore Indian rupees. Then, since the Russian bank has 5 crore Indian rupees in its Indian account, assuming exchange rate to be 1.5, this Russian bank will use its account in Russia to pay the sunflower oil trader a converted sum of 3.33 crore ruble. That is how the Russian trader gets 3.33 crore ruble in his account. Now mind you, this would also involve commissions from both the Indian bank and the Russian bank. So in reality, he would get 3.33 crore ruble minus commission charges in his account. Similarly, this Vostro account will also be used for exports. So let's say a Russian company wants to import tea from India. So the Russian company would pay 100,000 Russian rubles to the Russian bank. Then, since the Russian bank has Indian rupees stored in the Vostro account in India, that Vostro account would pay 1,50,000 Indian rupees to the tea company. This is again assuming an exchange rate of 1.5 for simplification of calculation. So just like last time, the commissions will be deducted on both sides and the remaining amount will be transferred. This is how the transactions are expected to change format once this system is brought into play. Now the question over here is, if this system is brought into play, what are the advantages that India will enjoy? Well, here's where we've got two game-changing advantages and one big threat that is involved in opting for this system. The first advantage is that we'll be able to trade with Russia, which is one of our biggest trade partners with a bilateral trade of $13 billion.
Wow.
And considering the condition of Russian trade right now, we could get our goods at a much cheaper cost. Secondly, it's not just Russia, but we could also start trading with other countries that have been sanctioned by the United States, and this includes critical players like Venezuela and Iran. And fun fact over here is that both these countries had already shown interest in using this kind of system. So that's pretty good. Cherry on the cake over here is that this list also includes the one and only United Arab Emirates. So this system will help us a lot in terms of decreasing our dependence on dollars. It will help us a lot in protecting our trade from the whims and fancies of the West, and most importantly, it will ease the pressure on our exchange rates as of now. And lastly, the biggest threat to us is that we are literally challenging the dominance of Uncle Sam's dollars. So obviously, the United States will definitely not be happy about it. So don't be surprised if this move is taken back or if United States threatens to impose sanctions on India. Because mind you, our bilateral trade with US stands at $119.42 billion. So here's where we might face some trouble. This is all that you need to know about the RBI notification, its functioning and its geopolitical implications. And this brings me to the last part, which are the study materials to help you understand this fight of currencies better.
What are your